Many have heard and read that Jin have an unusual fondness for sweets. Not just traditional desserts, but anything with a sweet taste. Because of this, it is believed that Jin often frequent sweet shops. There are countless tales of sweets mysteriously disappearing from homes, with no explanation as to who took them. Similar stories are tied to sweet shops as well. This particular incident was shared by a close friend. It took place in a well-known market area in Karachi, Lalukhet. Every resident of Karachi is familiar with this bustling marketplace, home to some of the city's largest and most essential shops. Those who have visited Karimabad would know that Lalukhet is not far from there. During the early days of the COVID-19 lockdown, many traders in Karachi resisted closing their businesses. Lalukhet, being a crucial marketplace for daily wage earners, was among the areas where shopkeepers refused to comply with the government's shutdown orders. However, as the virus spread rapidly, the authorities enforced strict lockdown measures, forcing businesses to shut down with the help of the police. One shop, owned by a man in a small alley, struggled even before the lockdown due to its low customer traffic. With the new restrictions, his financial worries deepened. Only essential businesses like clinics, hospitals, and grocery stores were allowed to operate. However, many shopkeepers, especially in Lalukhet, secretly kept their stores half open, as police patrols in the area were limited. The shopkeeper, desperate to sustain his family, also kept his shop partially open. By the time Maghrib, evening prayer, ended, the alley would fall silent, creating an eerie atmosphere. He would sit in his shop after prayer, troubled by thoughts of the future. How would he feed his family? How would his children continue their education? Asking for help was out of the question, as his family took pride in their self-sufficiency. One night around 10 p.m., as the alley stood empty, a tall man knocked on the shop's shutter. The shopkeeper assumed it was a policeman since the man was dressed in all black. From his position behind the counter, he could only see the man's knees, indicating an extraordinary height. When asked who he was, the stranger replied that he wanted to place a large order for sweets. The shopkeeper, though hesitant, lifted the shutter slightly. As the man stepped inside, his towering presence became more evident. He stood around 6.5 feet tall, his head nearly touching the shop's ceiling. The stranger asked, "Do you have a large quantity of sweets available?" "How much do you need?" the shopkeeper inquired. "I need 101 kilos of sweets," the man replied. The shopkeeper explained that it was late at night and he could only provide what was already prepared. But the man insisted, offering to pay double if the sweets could be prepared overnight. Without hesitation, he placed a large sum of money on the counter. Seeing the money, the shopkeeper felt some relief. He checked his inventory and agreed to have the order ready by Fajr, pre-dawn prayer. He then called his son and instructed him to gather their workers. Within an hour, 5 or 6 workers arrived and the sweet-making process began. Since they were used to preparing sweets in large quantities, the task was not difficult. By 4 a.m., the shopkeeper and his son waited inside the shop for the man's return. Suddenly, 2 men appeared from the alley and lifted the shop's shutter. "Is our order ready?" one of them asked. Startled, the shopkeeper replied, "You should have knocked. We thought the police were raiding us." One of the men reassured him, "No, we just came to collect the sweets. We will also pay extra." The shopkeeper explained that the full payment had already been made by the man who placed the order. "He is our brother. We have come to collect on his behalf," they replied. Something about them felt off. The shop counter, made of glass, allowed the shopkeeper and his son to see the feet of their customers. But as the son glanced down, he noticed something terrifying. The 2 men had no feet. Their pants extended to their ankles, yet beneath them, there was nothing but empty space. They were floating. A wave of fear ran through the shopkeeper. He gripped his son's hand tightly and whispered, "Stay quiet. Do not engage in too much conversation." "But why?" the son asked. "Just stay silent and recite Ayatul Kursi," the shopkeeper urged. As the son obeyed, the men grew impatient. One of them slammed his hand on the counter and commanded, "Enough whispering. You already know who we are. Now, hand over our order." The shopkeeper hurriedly packed the sweets in baskets and handed them over. Despite the enormous weight, the men effortlessly lifted the baskets as if they were weightless. Before leaving, one of them turned and said, "This is not the first time we have visited you. Many from our kind have been buying sweets from your family long before you were born. Your grandfather knew this well. Keep this to yourself." They placed extra money on the counter and left. The son rushed outside to follow them, but they had vanished into thin air. Later, as the shopkeeper and his son reflected on what had happened, they felt relieved. They had earned a large sum of money, ensuring they would not struggle for food during the lockdown. However, an unsettling thought lingered in their minds. They had just encountered beings not from their world, beings who existed in a dimension beyond human perception. That night, an unexpected guest knocked at their home's door around 1 a.m. It was the same man who had originally placed the order. He inquired about the shopkeeper's health, as the latter had fallen ill after their meeting. When the son explained that his father's condition was worsening, the tall man calmly stepped inside. Without a word, he placed his hand on the shopkeeper's forehead, murmured a prayer, and reassured them. "He will be fine." The bodies of humans and jinn are different. The heat from a jinn's body can cause harm, and your father was simply frightened. There is nothing to worry about. With that, he left. When the son rushed outside to follow him, the man had disappeared once again. Later, when the son recounted the incident to his mother, she said, "He was one of the jinn. May Allah protect us. If he came to visit your father, then he must not be an evil one." She then advised, "We must keep our house clean and pure. These beings form bonds and maintain connections, but they can also cause harm." Thus an eerie chapter closed, but the memory of that night remained, etched in the minds of the family forever.